Hello. How are you, MJ? Hi, MJ.
Oh, hey, Nona, I guess that's interesting. They're recording the meeting before it starts.
I know.
And then we got in without the host.
I know. Many strange things going on. I guess there is a new process though for I think launching a meeting. I learned indirectly that the steps have changed slightly. That's all I know. How are you?
Oh, I'm okay. I've been sick for a week. You know, we went to Boston and babysat the grandkids. So we caught some bug, but it wasn't COVID, but it's been a pretty rough cold actually.
Yeah.
Portola Valley meeting.
Well, I guess we're official.
I don't know. I don't think we should record until people are ready to record.
Yeah, until the meeting starts, probably.
So
Hey,
it
Jennifer.
just said recording. And it says here, by the way, Jennifer can't be with us today. So I have spent the last half an hour making a slide deck. Don't you dare ask me a question, MJ.
Wait,
Don't ask any questions.
wait, you're saying Jennifer Eustra can't be with
She
us?
can't make it. So I'm
Oh,
sending her piece. So don't ask any questions. Just make it seem like you understand what I'm saying.
okay.
We
So
will.
anyways, oh, and we're recording, so that's
Yeah, is that a new thing? We're gonna start recording,
okay. And so this new Zoom setup, it automatically starts recording. And it has me, hi Craig, it has me listed as the host. So when I logged in, it allows you to come in early. And then the minute I logged in, it automatically said you are the host.
Yeah.
And I can see right here, we must be recording, although yes.
Yeah.
Recording.
well, the thing is, it was recording, when I guess Nona got in first and it started recording right away, right, Nona?
It did.
Yeah, so the whole
But
town gets to hear our little chit chat.
I know.
Well, it gave us fair warning though.
That's true. True.
So one thing Melissa pointed out is that before the meeting starts, you should not discuss any of the agenda items. So wait for the quorum to arrive and then for the meeting to start.
Full disclosure, I admitted that at the last half hour, I've had to pull together a slide deck because I'm presenting a presentation at the last minute. So I did ask everyone, don't ask a lot of hard questions. So that's bad. I guess it is. Okay. So we're going to wait. I'm going to close my window. I have such a hard time getting my lighting correct. I'm going to finally get it correct, and then the pandemic's going to end.
It's not going to end.
Yeah, will it ever end? And now we have monkeypox.
How many members are there total? How many people are we waiting for?
D. We have 6. Yeah, and there she is. Craig, I have a question. So for a quorum in our charter, we can have 7 members and we have 6. So a quorum is
4.
4. So we can have a meeting.
It's the majority of what's authorized, not what you actually have appointed. So if you have too many unfilled seats, we either need to fill seats or reduce the authorized size in order for you to be able to meet.
Okay. So it is 4 o'clock. I'm gonna call this meeting to order, and we are recording. I'm gonna do roll call. D, I saw you. Yes, hi.
Present.
MJ, you're here. Okay, Wanda, you are here.
Yes.
Nona, you are here.
I,
And Craig, you are here, and I am also here. So we're gonna start with oral communications for items not on the agenda. And I just want to say that the lawsuit against the committee was settled yesterday. We are going to be discussing this probably next month when we get instructions, and I'll include that in the agenda. And I just want to personally thank this committee, Nona and MJ. I just personally want to say thank you for staying on this committee, and Wanda and Dee, you are my heroes, and I want to thank you for joining this committee. Circumstances. So is there anyone on this committee, on the committee, that has an oral communication for items not on the agenda? Is there anybody in the public that has an oral communication that's not on this agenda? And I am trying to see, do I have a way, is there more people? Do I have to scroll?
If you put it in gallery mode, I see there's a total of 12 people, so I have all
Okay.
12 on my screen.
Okay, and I have gallery mode as well. Okay, so no one has their hand up. Okay. I'm going to call for the approval of the minutes from July 5th. Can I see a show of hands for approval of the minutes? Okay, so 1, 2, everyone approved the minutes? Wanda, did you approve the minutes?
Yeah, I did. You didn't look fast enough.
Okay, and I just want to thank MJ for a great job on the minutes. We had a recording snafu last month, and she put together very thorough minutes without a recording. So well done, well done. Okay, so we have next on our agenda a presentation based on a report called the Wildfire Risk Mitigation in Portola Valley Canyons. It's an executive summary created by the Portola Valley Canyon Working Group. And unfortunately, our presenter, Jennifer Easter, was unable to make it tonight. And I just found out literally an hour ago. So I pulled together, I will do the first part of the presentation, and that'll just be a summary of expert recommendations. And then Nona, who is our Conservation Committee liaison, will do the second part of the presentation, discussing the Conservation Committee perspective. Okay. So I am going to share my screen. Hold on here. I'm sorry, this looks new to me. I'm going to get this share screen. Okay. There we go. There we go. Okay. Alrighty. So the first thing I want to say is you need to open this report and watch the YouTube video. The YouTube video is incredible. And everything I'm going to summarize here is in this video. You can see Don Bullard, and you can see naturalists walking with this Portola Valley Canyon group, and hear them discussing the canyons and pointing out everything I'm going to summarize. So it's a fantastic video, worth your time. So I'm going to move this. Can I move this over? No, I can't. Okay, so it's blocking some of my presentation. What happened? Hold it. Yes, I'm there. So the first point of this report is few of us can do all the work that's needed, but doing what you can each year will reduce the risk of home loss. And I think that's a really important point, because it can seem a little overwhelming at times, all the things we need to do. Also, the expert said that houses on canyons should implement all of the standard recommendations for home hardening and defensible space. But in addition, the defensible space should be extended to 200 feet around structures on steep slopes or structures located at the end or in a canyon. And then I'm breaking this into two parts of their recommendations, or one for general mitigation and one they talked a little bit more about trees. For habitat and native vegetation, what you want is you want to keep that first foot or 2 feet of natives on the ground. And it's important to remember that natives are more fire resistant than non-native plants. So you don't want to just clear all the natives down to dirt, because what will happen is you will get a ton of non-native plants and they are invasive and they're going to create a huge fire danger. So the next thing they said, and it's really well described in this video, but it's kind of hard to articulate. You want to clear a ladder fuel so that you have, I'm having trouble seeing this. I apologize. This is actually blocking my screen. Damn. I'm just going to have to guess at what I said. I think I'm going to do it like this because at least I can see my slides, and I apologize. So you want to clear that ladder fuel so that you create this 8-foot gap between the ground and the canopy. And Dawn describes this so beautifully in this video, because you're in this canyon and you're looking out and you can't see anything. This ladder, this fuel ladder has just basically grown out of poison oak and all of these plants, and the firefighters, when they are trying to fight a fire can't see anything. So this is really well articulated, and when you're walking in those canyons, you want to see in a distance. So that's what you want to keep remembering. You want those first few feet of native plants, and then you want that gap. 80% of those ladder fuels in the Westridge Minoka canyons are made up of dead wood, poison oak, coyote brush, broom, and chamise. And you want to remove that dead wood, but all of the natives need to be cut back. You don't want to rip them up, even the poison oak. And I know that's our first reaction is to rip it up, but you really want to keep it there because, again, these are fire resistance. And if you just do the simple thing, you're going to significantly reduce your fire fuels in the canyon area. And also wildfire risk mitigation and habitat preservation are not mutually exclusive. They really complement each other. And that is something also that's stressed in this report and in that video. And then they also point out we want to stay back 25 feet from the creek beds, and that's for because that's critical wildlife habitat. And then they talk a little bit about trees. It's not going to be a surprise. You want to really target pines and eucalyptus and bay trees for removal, and oaks you just need to limb up 8 feet above the ground. And they stress that before you do any kind of major tree work in on a steep slope, you may want to check your slope stability. And there is a town's ground movement potential map that you can check. And they also say maybe you want to get an expert involved before you use that heavy equipment or you do a lot of vegetation removal. And then, of course, hand tools are less likely to disturb the soil. And, if you bring in heavy equipment, it's going to destroy some of that native habitat and native plants, and you're going to probably create more of a fire problem than you want. So, and that, of course, brings us back to cost, because it's a lot more expensive to bring in people with hand tools than heavy equipment. there was an interesting discussion in the video about, Dawn said that, pile burning can have its place. That's when, rather than bring in the big wood chippers, you do a pile burning of the debris. You have to get a permit, and if it's poison oak, you don't want to burn poison oak, and that's a real problem, because it can get in your lungs. They did talk a little bit about control burns, and he just did not think that was an option in our canyons, and that might be something that we should discuss with him at a later time. And I think that an interesting point is they stress that, you know, fire risk can be mitigated, but not totally eliminated. So now I'm going to turn it over to the real expert. And Nona, please give us the Conservation Committee perspective.
Okay, so I'm going to share my screen and let's see if this will work. Okay, can you see my screen?
I see you have started sharing, but yes, we can see it.
Okay. Let me back up. So this is not at this first page. Sorry, you're getting a preview of everything I'm going to say. There we go. Okay, now that you've seen it in reverse, I'll start at the beginning. So as Jennifer said, I am the Conservation Committee liaison, and my role is really to think about how to coordinate and dovetail the work of wildfire preparedness and conservation when they're dealing with topics that overlap. So obviously fire is one instance. And I call this a conservation perspective. I guess I could have a capital C on conservation here. I view my role as representing the Conservation Committee, and so I presented this to the Conservation Committee and they are in support of it. So it is the perspective of the Conservation Committee. And the map that you see here sort of frames what I think is fundamentally the conservation perspective, which is to take a landscape view of most of the ecological or fire-related questions that we have in town. So this is a terrain map of the town, and I think you can see that Portola Valley is topographically complex. There are everything from really deep canyons to what you might call wrinkles in the landscape. And I think it's all pretty intuitive and well known to people already that the properties of canyons scale to their length, their depth, and the steepness of the canyon. One thing that's really nice about coming from the Conservation Committee to the Wildfire Preparedness Committee this year as the liaison is that the Conservation Committee also did a report last year, and it's a guide to landscape management for fire risk reduction. And so I'm going to go over that a little bit today. So let me see if I can make this advance. Okay. So the first thing is that there is agreement between the two reports on the fire risk associated with canyons. Canyons are fundamentally fire corridors. The topography of a canyon accelerates the spread of fire up the canyon, and the density of vegetation, which can be unusually high in canyons, can amplify fire risk. On the other hand, we always have to think about fire risk as not just being about vegetation, but also about structures. And I thought it was really helpful to refer to the NIST report, which is something that I think everybody on this committee is familiar with and has really studied a lot. The NIST report emphasizes the fuel content in structures, but it also notes, and I have a quote here from it, "It should be noted that wildland vegetation at the edge of an interface community can also generate very high heat fluxes with very long flame lengths, much longer than what was generated from a residential structure. These wildland fire heat fluxes can be very large and easily result in a structure ignition, even if they are not as long-lived as fluxes from a fully involved residence. And then finally, on canyons, these impacts can be further accentuated in the presence of complex terrain that is slope, aspect, and canyons. Interestingly, this is really the only comment in the NIST report on canyons. So also in concert with the canyon report that Jennifer Eustra and others prepared, the Conservation Committee has the guide that we produced starts by saying, do the basics. And that's what's shown here. What I'd like to do is walk you through a little bit of the guide that was produced by the Conservation Committee. We completed it last year. And you can see the URLs at the bottom of the screen. So all of this information is posted on the Conservation Committee website. I think in pictures. I think a lot of conservation people think in pictures. And so not only do I love maps, I love diagrams. And the idea of this guide is really to say, what should it look like? How can we help residents determine what, when, and how to minimize disruption and destruction of local plant communities and wildlife habitat, and as we go ahead and clear vegetation for fire safety? So this is a 6-page document, and on each page, you see 3 pages of it here. On each page, it has questions, and then it has really simple answers. And for each answer, there's a link to the right, and that takes you to another document if you want more details. So there are questions like, well, what does it really mean to reduce vegetation? What are the plants to leave? How do I prune? When do I prune? How much do I prune? All of those questions are sort of the basic real how-tos of how you do vegetation management. This next slide is an example of a page. So this is page 2 of the 6-page document. So again, what does habitat-friendly vegetation management look like in practice? And so if you go to the bottom of the page and it says plan for drought, it'll talk about what kinds of plants to reduce in abundance, what kinds of plants to put in. And then if you go to the link at the right and you click on that, it will take you to another document, which is shown here on the right of your screen, which is the 6-page list of low fire hazard California native plants that's on the Conservation Committee website. And so this is a list that we've prepared basically in concert with the California Native Plant Society and other native plant associations, and has been approved by the town council, for posting and making available. There's a lot of information in those lists. The next thing that the conservation guide does is basically what the Canyon report says, is don't just do the basics, go beyond the basic guidance. And so this is another diagram that's part of the report, and it illustrates what it means to keep trees in the landscape, but to establish spacing between tree canopies, and also to establish spacing, horizontal spacing between the low-growing shrubs that you've trimmed down to, say, knee height, and also to leave duff where it's present below the trees. Clearing is important, but it should be limited. And part of the reason for that is, as Jennifer said, that if you leave the trees and allow them to create shade, you reduce the growth of invasive plants that are very flammable fuels. And if in addition you leave low-growing shrubs, you outcompete those invasive plants as well. And so not only are you lowering fire risk by leaving the right kind of vegetation in the right configuration, you're also providing habitat for wildlife, including things like small mammals that eat invasive plants, like rabbits that would live in the small shrubs and come out of those shrubs where they have shelter to forage on invasive grasses or invasive thistles, things like that. So it's a landscape that works in multiple ways that are positive. All of the guidance that we think about coming from conservation is really rooted, as I said, in this landscape perspective, which looks at canyons as being not just corridors for fire, but corridors for other things as well. And so this is a map I've made that incorporates data from the Protected Lands Network for the Bay Area, and also data from San Mateo County on where the streams are located. And of course, the streams really tell us where the canyons are too. The light blue lines that aren't outlined in white are minor streams. The bolder blue lines that are outlined in white are what are considered the major creeks in San Mateo County within Portola Valley. So not only are canyons fire corridors, they're also hydrologic corridors, which means that they collect and convey water, sediment, plant material, soil, pathogens, all kinds of things. Whatever starts in the watershed at the top of the canyon can get deposited at various places down the canyon, and that can have either positive or negative effects on fire risk at those lower elevations. Another important hydrologic component of being in a canyon is that it can affect the slope and aspect, which affect microclimate. So if, for example, you have an east-west canyon, then you have north-south slopes on the opposite sides, and those will have very different vegetation. So you can have basically a very dry south-facing slope and a moister north-facing slope and a very moist canyon in between. And the consequence of that is that you get these complex habitat mosaics that involve multiple kinds of resources for animals, multiple kinds of shelter. And because they're in canyons and they're undeveloped, they're also safe passage for animals. So it's a wildlife corridor at the same time. This is a lot to think about, but it sort of is the checklist of things that you can think about how they vary for different canyons in the town and for different properties within any given canyon, because in a sense, each property is unique and we need to think about it that way. One good example that's easy to illustrate graphically is the role of canyons and as hydrologic corridors, which make them pathogen corridors as well. And so if you look in this slide, this is a map of the town showing the incidence of sudden oak death in Portola Valley, outlined in white, and beyond. And these are the public data from the sod blitz surveys that have been going on all throughout the Bay Area since 2008. And these are the cumulative data. And if you think back to what the canyon, the terrain map looks like, you can see that a lot of the sudden oak death has been coming in from the Coast Range and is being carried to some extent down creeks, either by the water or by wind-driven fog. And that's because sudden oak death is a pathogen that's an aqueous pathogen. It requires water. These results are all based on sampling symptomatic bay trees rather than coast live oaks, which are a real victim. But even if you look up at the top, in the top right in the northeast corner of Portola Valley at the Westridge Minoka Canyon, you can see that there is some incidence of sudden oak death there now. And the reason why this is significant is that if sudden oak death spreads among coast live oaks, those are really, really flammable trees. Those are probably one of our highest risk trees in terms of fire risk, because as they die, they retain their foliage and they just have this complete canopy of dead leaves in them until they come down. So this is just one example of, fire goes up canyons, but water goes down, and so do pathogens. And I'd like to close with one more sort of guide element from the Conservation Committee. So we've talked about, thinking of the canyon, there's multiple kinds of corridors, doing the basic work, and then going beyond that in canyons. But to get to even a more kind of place-based perspective and thinking about what we need to do in canyons, I wanted to zoom in on the Westridge Minoka Canyon, which is shown here just below Westridge Drive. This is, I don't know if my pointer here will show it or if you can see it. So here's Minoka here. And so, you know from having seen the previous slides that this isn't one of the biggest canyons in Portola Valley, but it is considered a major stream. And one of the most interesting things about parcel boundaries in Portola Valley is that in general, if you trace the canyons, the parcels all stop at the bottom of the canyon. It's not true of all parcels, but if you go up here to the very top and you look at the Escobar Canyon, you can see the same thing. The parcels stop at the canyon bottom. And so what that means is that you have people on opposite sides of the canyon doing their own fuel reduction. And so in some sense, they're kind of partners in shaping what goes down the creek to people lower in the canyon. But fires travel not only just up the canyon bottom, they also travel up the slope of the canyon. And so I think in a very real sense, the most important take-home message about thinking about this from a conservation perspective is that people need to work together, that whether your fire risk is because of a canyon or something else, we are really all in this together. The residents higher in the canyon can protect themselves and those who are lower in the canyon by managing things like runoff and erosion, the transport of invasive seeds, pathogens, and debris. And the people who are lower in the canyon can protect themselves and those who are higher in the canyon by reducing the likelihood that their property will contribute to a fire that moves fast and has long flame lengths. So it's basically the same take home as the canyon report, that everyone benefits from having canyon corridors that provide resources and shelter and passage for wildlife, because those same features can contribute to fire safety. So that's the Conservation Committee perspective, and I'll stop sharing now.
Thank you, Nona. That was a really incredible presentation. I really appreciate it. And I also want to thank the Portola Valley Canyon Working Group for a great report. Are there any questions from the committee? No questions from the committee. The only observation I make as when I listen to your presentation is I suddenly realized there is, look at, sorry, I saw a hand go up. As we may see more wildfires in the next few months, I worry that residents are going to panic and they're going to have somebody go in and do mitigation that don't really understand how to do mitigation in the canyons areas. And this is really challenging to do it correctly. And, I keep coming back to this idea of contractors that we know and trust, some kind of way to, we have the issue of, we may have residents that need some kind of low income grant, and that's one problem. But we have residents that I used to live on Westridge, right backing up to a canyon. And I just get the feeling that there's a lot of people out there that if you just said, use this person, it's going to cost this much, and they're going to do a good job, and it's going to be good for the habitat. I just have a feeling we get some good work done. And this fire mitigation is going to be really challenging work.
Yeah, I think one thing to keep in mind is that it really helps to have Woodside Fire Protection District come in and evaluate the property, because basically all of the guidance that conservation has assembled and that the Canyon report assembled comes from the fire agencies, right? We're just trying to make it more accessible and maybe a little bit more tailored to Portola Valley than it might otherwise be. So having Dawn or someone come in and say, oh, this is what you need to do. That's a problem. That's not a problem. That's one way to start. Also, the Canyon report that Jennifer Eustra and others put together has a list of contractors that you can contact to do work, and they're familiar with what Woodside Fire expects in Portola Valley.
And you trust them to do the work well.
I mean, I can't personally endorse any of them, but I think that it's worth talking to them and to the authors of the Canyon report, who probably did vet them.
I just also, I want to remind everyone, when I did the fuel mitigation slides last month, you know, the ranch had a really interesting model where they come in and they say, if you can get a group of homes together, in that case, they match the funds, but they actually orchestrate the work for the homeowners. And that's another idea, is if we could get a group of people that are willing to pay for it, maybe we somehow orchestrate it, not we, but perhaps the fire district. And they make sure that the work is done properly and we get a good result. Just a thought. Any other questions, comments from the committees before we take questions?
I wanted to make maybe two more minor comments. One is the question we get asked the most is about poison oak. And you know, there are people who say, oh, it's, you know, it's a good native plant, and it is, but it's really abundant, more abundant than we probably need it to be. There's no shortage of poison oak. It grows back very rapidly, and so it's requires regular maintenance, and it produces highly toxic smoke. So different people in the conservation world will have slightly different perspectives on poison oak, but some of us feel like its only real virtue is that it turns bright red in the fall. And so it can be beautiful, but it's, you know, it's a risk. The second thing I wanted to mention is that a lot of these canyon properties, you know, only have about 200 feet down to the bottom of the canyon from the structure. And so if you're going to really safeguard the creek, you can't do the full 200 feet from the house down, but you really don't need to in that case. That if you can maintain healthy vegetation down there, then that vegetation itself should be, you know, fire resistant oaks that are getting enough moisture that they're not going to be highly flammable.
Any other comments from the committee? Okay, I saw Betsy. Betsy.
Yes, thank you. Thanks for the opportunity to listen to this really interesting presentation. And thank you first to the committee members, those present today, those not in the Conservation Committee, for investing such time. And Nona, a question about, I'm referring back to the first half of the presentation about deadwood removal and bringing in chippers. So my question really relates to, for a moment, it looked to me as though the canyon, one of the canyons in question, has very little SOD, but I want to circle back to that at the end, the nature of what we do with SOD infected areas. But can you describe best practices for the chipping material itself, for what is best practices for the depth of chipping material from both the perspective of conservation and the perspective of wildfire? And as well, do we want to keep all of the the chips on premises within a reasonable radius of the site?
That's a lot of questions.
I know, I'm
And
sorry.
I won't, I'll give you one perspective. I don't know if it's sort of the ultimate answer. So, dead trees, if they are snags that are primarily, thick limbs, those are good habitat and they're not a huge fire risk in general. So, nesting birds will use them if they're cavity nesters, that kind of thing. Trees that have to be taken down, the thick limbs and trunks can be left on the ground without increasing fire risk substantially. The finer material should be at least cut or chipped so that it's not this sort of network of fine material that can carry a fire. If the tree has sudden oak death, or if you don't know if it has sudden oak death, the general guidance is that it should stay on site. There is a quarantine. Each county has a quarantine if it has sudden oak death, and that material should not be removed unless it's going to an authorized place that can deal with infected material. But it's best to just leave it on site and to let it decompose in place. There is debate about when you should do fuel reduction, because the time when it's safest to do it in terms of fire risk is generally also the time when you're most likely to spread sudden oak death if you don't disinfect your equipment in between trees, if you're just, say, limbing up, let's say. And so in general, the recommendation for that is that after you limb something, you should basically clean the chipper or the chainsaw or whatever the tool is by cutting something that's known to be clean material between trees. The depth of mulch that you leave in the form of chips, that's a subject of some debate. And it probably depends on how big the chips are. Obviously, fires can burn for a long time in chips, but chips also retain moisture in the soil, which means that they maintain a healthier vegetation and return nutrients to the soil.
So we're not going to put your neck out and give any depth from either perspective. I mean, are we talking about inches?
I think the guidance has varied on that. And so I think that's if you want to know the fire department's perspective on that, I think it's best to refer to their documents.
Okay.
I just think that there's some difference of opinion. And to be honest, there's probably, chips can vary between whether or not they're oak chips or whether or not it's eucalyptus or it's something like chamise that's highly flammable. And it probably also depends on the particular habitat that you're in.
I think MJ might
you.
weigh in on that.
Yeah, I mean, the general guidance has been 2 to 4 inches deep. And I actually went to this Marin Ember Stomp Festival and talked to a Marin Master Gardener, where he told me that even eucalyptus can be chipped and used as mulch, because he says the terpenes and the oils will evaporate after several days. So he says, don't do it during the heat of the summer. But I haven't read that anywhere else. And then actually I wrote a tip not too long ago, or not a tip, it was a comment on PV Forum where someone asked, what do I do with all my chips? And so I gave him the 2 to 4 inch guidance. And then Denise and Nia sort of chastised me in an email a little bit, saying, well, you need to tell people it depends on the slope, what their property is like. And you have to emphasize that these chips have to be, 30 or 100 feet away from the house, because she says, you have to worry about, they're turning into embers. So that's what I can tell you.
and I believe the ranch guidance is 2 inches. But it's something close to 2 inches. They actually bring a ruler around and they measure. So, Christy, you got a question.
Thank you, everyone.
Yes, thank you for the presentation. I missed the conservation meeting yesterday because I had a previous plan. So I'm curious if this was part of the presentation. And as we know, our town is made of many canyons. So my question is, do we plan to get grant money to help us with our canyons? And is that part of this committee's undertaking if our staff doesn't have time to fill out applications for this type of thing?
Can you defer till I give my update for the finance committee? Good question. Will you be here, Christy?
Yes,
Defer?
yes, I'm
Okay,
here.
great.
Mhm.
We'll talk about that then. Any other committee comments before we?
I have a question, actually.
Yeah,
And
okay, go ahead.
yeah, I live on Minoka Road and we back up to the Stanford Wedge. And a few years back, Stanford came through and did brush clearing 100 feet behind everybody's homes down towards the canyon. And then last year, I think it was last year, or maybe a year and a half ago, they came through again and limbed up the trees and also removed trees that were deemed to be extraneous or, you know, could pose fire hazard. And that was mostly smaller trees. And the rest of the stuff that we do, the neighbors, we all keep track of this by weed whacking in the spring, just before everything starts to dry out. So we've been doing a pretty good job of keeping it clear. But I was wondering if is this something that Stanford is going to continue to keep an eye on, or is that just part of this kind of process that they're going through in order to try and get the building done down on Alpine Road, or, you know, whatever scenario might be possible there?
Nona, do you want me to answer that, or do you know more about this than I do, which is
Well,
highly possible?
I can just say that Stanford's wildfire management plan is a 5-year plan, and the idea of it, it's public, it's online, and it involves you know, treating all of the Stanford lands as a function of their fire risk on a cyclical basis. So the plan is to maintain it. I don't know if it's a 5-year cycle for that parcel or not, but that's the idea.
And next month, we're going to have a presentation by MidPen about their fire mitigation plan. And I know the town manager is, I requested that he try to arrange a time where Stanford could also come in and discuss their fire mitigation plan. So adding to what Nona said, which was absolutely correct, I put that request in. So hopefully we'll get them in the next few months.
Okay, yeah, that'd be great to know more about what the long-term plan is for that. So far, they've done a good job of keeping that area clear 100 feet from our property line, so.
And that online plan Nona mentioned, I've looked at it, and it's a very thorough plan, but you know, it would be nice to be able to ask them questions. So do we have any comments? So Nona, I guess just for the committee, as we leave this, I think it's important to keep in mind, how are we going to get in the next 10 years to the point where these canyons are safer and our residents have performed this fire mitigation work? And how do we get it done in a conservation wise way? And how do we get it done in a fire safety way? So I think this report and Nona's presentation is really important, that it points out the challenges that the residents face. And our challenge is to figure out what the residents need. Okay, so we are definitely going to be discussing this more. Yes, Nona.
So I think it's important to recognize that canyons are one focus, but everybody in Portola Valley has a fire risk, right?
Yeah.
And so, you know, my husband and I don't live in a canyon, but we sort of live at the bottom of one, I suppose, but we live where parcels are smaller. And so my neighbor's house is 20 feet from the wall of our house. And so, you know, we have to think about structure to structure fire transmission. So I think everybody has a risk, and the you know, can a distinctive kind of risk, but everybody has a risk.
I agree. And the question is, what can we do? And where are we going to focus our proposal, our plans? And it's true. Anyone else want to weigh in on anything? No other comments. Okay, so we are, and thank you, Nona, very much. So we're at subcommittee and committee liaison updates. And the first is the Home Hardening and Vegetation Management Subcommittee update. And that's MJ and D.
Okay, so I'll start off. I don't like to be, blow my own horn, but Jennifer asked me to mention that back in May, I was awarded a $500 grant from the NFPA for National Wildfire Preparedness Day. And half of the money went to, or I gave it to Lynn Eisberg, because she organized a neighborhood activity on Wyndham. And she used the money to help people offset the cost of getting their roofs cleared. The other half of the grant is going to go to people on Alhambra Court. Once Dee's going to talk about, she's kind of picking up where Jennifer Eustra left off on the Ready for Wildfire Sprint. And once we identify who actually did some work done, we're going to spread the other $250 amongst those neighbors. Let's see. I also recently joined a state group of a work group of the Board of Forestry. It's called the Zone Zero Work Group. And what we're working on is the regulatory text for a new law that was AB 3074 was signed into law in September of 2020. So it's supposed to take effect of January 1st of next year for new construction. And what we're working on in the work group is to define what people are supposed to do within that 0 to 5 distance around your house. The following year, then the Zone Zero standards will take effect for existing construction in the very high fire zones. And the assumption is that it would be enforced by the fire district. So let me just share my screen. This is, can you guys see this?
Yes.
So some of the things, I have a set of slides on a Dropbox link. I can put it up there, but these are early recommendations from the work group. These aren't actually the final ones, but one thing, for example, is no synthetic lawn within 5 feet of your home. They're going to outlaw decorative structures that are flammable. Okay. As you may know, you don't want a wooden fence within 5 feet of your home. Other places will say 10 feet. And actually, I've just implemented something on my house, which goes beyond 10 feet. But basically, wooden fences that attach to your home, it's kind of like, in the old Road Runner cartoons where the Road Runner sets a a gunpowder flame and it goes up and then it blows up the coyote, right? Well, that's kind of what a wood fence can be on your house. And so the Zone Zero work group really wants people to get rid of that 5 foot of combustible fencing. Even things like storage structures, if you have a wooden combustible storage structure right next to your house, or you have piles of firewood, or you have piles of firewood and other combustibles under your deck, that's another big thing that, is basically going to be regulated. So I just wanted to point that out to people. And again, this is the very high fire zone. So as I've been trying to tell people, if the town ends up being very high fire across the town, it's going to apply to everybody. All right, the next thing I want to mention is that, as you may know, if you read the PV weekly updates, Carrie Chin has been giving notice for quite a while, and the neighbors in those areas were notified. But there is right-of-way work going on Golden Oak. It started last week. I'm going to write a tip about it as soon as I have some good pictures. But, when they did the right-of-way cleanup on Westridge, it wasn't, didn't have as much impact on individuals because there's like I guess a 200-foot setback from the road. But that's not the case on Golden Oak. Apparently, there were a couple of neighbors that were upset that they're going to lose their privacy hedges and things like that. But, too many people have planted in the right of way, planted hedges and privacy things like a row of acacia. And I guess last week, the town spent 2 days cleaning out a bunch of acacia in front of just one parcel. So this project is going to take a long time. Right now it's slated to go, I think, through October, just for Golden Oak, but we'll see what happens. So that's my portion. And Dee, do you want to pick up?
Sure, I'll chime in. First of all, I guess I want to commend this committee. I've been, I'm late to the party or early to just joining you guys and going through all of the material since 2019. And this committee has really, I think, done an amazing amount of work in that amount of time. One of my tasks this last month was to try to pick up where the Sprint program left off. And I haven't been able to talk to all of the participants yet, but so far the feedback has been very positive. I think that it is so much that I would like to try to choose another neighborhood to continue this. And basically the summary is that we're doing what we were set out to do, is to bring this issue into the forefront of people's minds. A lot of these residents have done the work before, but it was really good to actually have an assessment, have the fire district come out and point out the specifics that were happening, and even things like, yeah, I did have a go bag, but this was a great reminder for me to go pick it up and see if anything was expired or what can I add to it. So I think that's definitely a plus and a positive, and I think that work should continue. One question that did keep popping up was regarding our hardening ordinances, our building code ordinances that we passed last year. And in particular, deck material. So I understand for new construction, we want non-combustible materials. But I was wondering, what's the procedure, or if this committee could go back and inquire about existing decks. Again, in the spirit that people recognize that a wood deck is not a great choice for Portola Valley, but they don't want to re-engineer all of the structure. They don't want to have to re-engineer if you're going with a solid surface deck. That takes that's a very different construction project. So I'm not sure what the next step is, but I would like to clarify what are the choices that folks have um, if they want to replace the deck, but not so somewhere in between, right? So they want to get rid of the wood, but they aren't prepared to rework things so that they have a tile or stone. There's waterproofing, there's different assemblies that come into play when you go to that next level. So I guess this is really more of a procedural question. What's our next step, or who can we talk to about this?
So Dee, are you asking what we would do if we wanted to review whether or not to change our recommendation?
Or
Jeremy,
actually maybe clarify. I mean, I'm a retired building contractor and I had to sift through a lot of material to try to find out. I went to Cal Fire's, their WUI handbook products. There's several products that are listed that are Class A, but they would still be an open space decking. Like you would be able to put deck material on the joists that you have. So I'm just trying to get some clarification. Is there a possibility, or are there materials that are approved by Portola Valley for folks that have an existing deck situation?
so so I'm just trying to understand what we want to do. I have the email to the contractor that wrote the final code. And we can email him and say, what can you use right now? Or are you asking if we wanted to change what is in the code right now, how would we proceed? Because that would be a question for Jeremy.
Right. So I guess it's two. I guess we'll start with the first step of really clarifying, is there something out there that folks can use? And then if it's not, then the second step would be, could we go back and revisit how we got to this decision?
Yeah, so I definitely have the email of the consultant that just send me what you want to ask and I will make that request. And then Jeremy, are you here?
Yes, I am. Great to see everybody. Dee, thanks for bringing this up. There was candidly a little confusion earlier in the year after the adoption of our home hardening ordinance on this particular issue. The way that the code had initially been written, it, at least the way we interpreted our code, it was written to say that decks could only be built using non-combustible materials. What we subsequently discovered was that there really wasn't much out there under that definition. So we went back, had a couple conversations with our building official. That's the guy that Jennifer's referred to, Ron, and Don Bullard, and looked at our code again. And we made the determination that our code actually did, as written, allow for ignition resistant materials, which opened up a whole other class of stuff. So if you're hearing from folks, feel free to have them reach out to town staff here. But there's a whole number of materials that are, while they may not be perfect, we don't want perfect to be the enemy of good here, and they'll be very appropriate materials for deck construction. To the second part of what I understood the question to be, this committee, I think it's one of its core responsibilities is to make suggestions as it relates to building code, et cetera, as it's done in the past. And in my update, I've got a few things to say about that. And if that's okay with you, I'll hold off on making those comments this time. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Jeremy. I appreciate it. That's definitely welcome news because folks do want to do the right thing. But so I'll look forward to maybe Jennifer, you and I could reach out to Ron and just get a list. That would be, and put that together, and we could make that accessible somewhere so that folks know.
So as I take it, if he says, he's going to say, yes, we can use all these materials and then we can send that word out to everybody. I mean, am I hearing that we can use these kind of synthetic materials like, what is it, Trex and?
AZEK Yeah.
Yeah, without getting specific on the materials, because you're asking the wrong guy. What we found was that there's some materials that were totally appropriate under our code that you could use for your roof, but we were saying you couldn't use it for your deck. So there's a list that Ron has, and so anyone that's thinking about doing that kind of work, and this should go for any work in town, the first thing they should do is contact the planning and building department and make sure they're on the right track. They can have a pre-application meeting and the like, and we can answer those questions.
Okay, let's put that, you just send me what you want to ask and I will copy you on the email, okay? But I want to make sure it comes from me because the town staff is looking for my email and then they're going to forward it. MJ, do you have did you want to add something to that?
Oh, well, I'm a little confused, but yeah, why don't you guys talk to Ron of France, I think his name is, and find out what he says. What's allowed. I think I'm a little afraid that as long as the ordinance says non-combustible, we're kind of stuck. And it seems to me that word has to change to ignition resistant or class A.
Or we could clarify, there are two different tests that that they use, and there's different ratings. So I think that we could clarify, again, going back to the intention is that we want to exceed, we want to show that we're being proactive and exceeding some of these regulations. So even like flame spread, there's 3 different classes. So we could say class A flame spread, or, so I think that there's a way to designate that. But I do agree that the word non-combustible should be revised.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm just going to articulate what I'm hearing we're going to do. Dee and I are going to reach out to Ron, the consultant. Dee is going to understand exactly what people are allowed to use for replacing their deck, remodeling their deck, repairing their deck. And then she will make a presentation to the committee if something isn't quite the way she thinks it should be. And then we can look at wording of some recommendation and vote on it. And then we would pass it on to the appropriate people in town. And I'm assuming since Jeremy has not started waving his hands, that is going to work for him. Okay.
I don't have that reaction on Zoom. But no, that all sounds good.
Okay. Thank you, MJ, for a great update. Dee, thank you. We're so glad to have you, to have a contractor on the committee. This is fantastic. Okay. Any comments from the committee on this update? Okay. Ms. Simmons, I can't pronounce your first name. How do I pronounce that?
Serena.
Serena, beautiful name, Serena.
So I'd be interested in knowing whether those building materials are also appropriate if you have a storage unit that you need nearby your house, whether those kinds of building materials would allow for that. Building a stone storage shed is just as complicated as building a stone deck is.
If I could speak on behalf of the Zone 0 work group, what they're talking about is the storage sheds should be should comply with Chapter 7A. So whatever building material you could use for to satisfy Chapter 7A would
what
be
is
okay.
It's chapter of what?
The building
California
code.
Building code, yeah.
Yeah.
The California Building Code, CBC, Chapter 7A. And just briefly, you could choose a cement product or stucco. There are definitely options that you could use.
So hardy board I could make it out of. If
Right.
would I need to use a metal framing inside the hardy board, or could I use wood framing inside the hardy board?
Use wood inside. That's my understanding.
Yeah, that's correct.
Thank you.
Christie.
Thank you. Yeah, I think if it's hard for someone on the committee to find the information, then it's probably hard for the residents to find the information on decks. So I think this is something that we need to get out and very clear to residents so we don't have issues like we had with one resident. Thank you.
Yeah. David.
Hi, thanks. To follow on a little bit with that, so we have a redwood old deck that should probably be replaced, and I'd be happy to put in TimberTech Class A, vintage, whatever. But it can't. There's no way we're going to put slate in there. So deferring to a consultant or whoever you're going to punt this off to, the real issue is I'm willing to do this if I can make it affordable, but if I can't, it's nuts. It's not the right thing. So I'd love to see us encourage people to upgrade what they have without making it implausible for them to do anything financially realistic. So that'd be my 2 cents. Thank you.
Okay. And David, I just want to clarify that the consultant we're talking about is the person that will understand and be able to clarify the best what our code says. We're not deferring to him. We're getting the information so that we can.
Right, but it's.
I'm sorry.
I think,
This is Jeremy. Let me interrupt for just a quick second here.
Yeah.
We're talking about our building official. The town's building official, although he is official, I guess a consultant officially, he serves in that capacity. So he helps write our building code. He makes interpretations on our building code and is available to Laura for those kinds of issues. This is not a
Sure, but we
third party.
we are the town, and I think if of course, if you're the building official, you want everything built out of granite in a cube. But as a town public body, to me, I think we should encourage people to upgrade what they have without making it implausible. And that's, to me, that's the job of the town government, which gets delegated to people who are officials. But it's not interpreting the code, it's making the code, if you will, I think. Thank you.
Thank you, David. And Jeremy, I apologize. He was described to me as a consultant, and I will now understand better. MJ, did you have something to say?
Yeah, I just wanted to reiterate to Dave that we agree with him completely and we're trying to fix this problem. But we just need better understanding of what the code says and how it's interpreted. And if it's unclear, then we will get it more. We will make it absolutely clear, or Dee will.
Yeah, and in my presentation, I'm gonna talk about toolkit, and this is exactly the kind of thing we need. Any other comments? Thank you, Dee and MJ, and we're so glad that we have your expertise on the committee. And Dee, you have your plan. We have a plan for you. Okay, I'm gonna do my update now, a finance insurance subcommittee update, and hopefully this will answer some questions. Okay, so get my notes here. I'm going to do a quick review of where we are with our 10-year wildfire mitigation proposal, because we didn't have our last session recorded, and we probably won't be actually discussing this proposal till November because we have so many other things coming up. We know that the goal of our 10-year proposal is to engage and empower residents in order to make Portola Valley safer from wildfire. And we know that that basically involves preparing for our residents for evacuation, performing vegetation management, and encouraging home hardening. And over the next 6 months, we're going to get a lot of new information as well. We're going to be reviewing the safety element in the next few months. The wildfire portion, we're going to be getting some new fire hazard maps that will be very informative. And this Safer from Wildfire joint program between the governor and the Insurance Commission and CAL FIRE is probably going to generate some new fire insurance regulations that I think will also be a factor. And just to note, we're also going to have in October, Don Bullard present on enforcement. And we're going to get a chance to ask him all sorts of questions. And I think that's going to also give us a lot of information. We also, based on our discussions, know that any empowerment program has to, the heart of it's going to be our community leaders. And we know we're going to have to really listen and get our FireWise leaders involved and our block captains involved and our volunteers involved, because they are the ones that are going to make the biggest difference over the next 10 years. And we also know that we need to listen to them and find out what they want and what they need to make a difference. And that comes down to a toolkit. It could be a recommended contractor list. It could be arranging for discounts from vendors and manufacturers, or how-to videos, or conservation-wise mitigation instructions, or priority list, or these kind of answers to how you upgrade your deck to be more fire safe. And that is going to be really critical. And actually MJ&D and their subcommittee is actually focused on this piece along with this R4W sprint program. And they're going to kind of direct that discussion over the coming months because they're talking to these community leaders. We also know that this proposal is going to have to review our call to action programs and really identify how we can improve them. And then there is this wildfire mitigation program, a funded program. And I just want to call out Jeremy, our town manager, because he has been so generous with his time. And he's really helped bring me up to speed on this issue. And we're going to have to look over the next few months on what kind of a wildfire mitigation program makes sense. And be realistic about what the town can afford. And, you know, is that a program that's going to help community leaders, and what's the best choice? And to Christie's question, you bet, when we decide what program makes sense, I'm going to do everything I can to try to find grant money. Obviously, I'm not a grant writer, but I know the town staff is very supportive of our efforts. We are not alone. The fire district is very supportive, and so is the town council. And so the first thing we have to do is to find a program that makes sense. And then we have to figure out how to fund it. And it depends on what program we eventually decide makes sense. So that is where we are. And I'm sure that we're going to have more questions. And where's my clicker? So questions from the committee? None. Questions from the community? Christy.
I think I listened to a talk from Hillsborough, and they became a FireWise community. And if you are a FireWise community, I know the ranch is, maybe another area, but I know the ranch is. They get funding because they've proven they're a FireWise community. And this was started by a group of residents. And I believe the state recognizes that to give grants, and maybe even insurance companies recognize that to give insurance. So am I correct? Maybe somebody could confirm or not confirm this, and would that be our first direction? That's my,
So I'm going to eventually turn this over to Jeremy to talk about grants because he is an expert. We do not have a first direction because the committee has not even begun discussing this. And there's a lot of things we have to take into account. As Nona says, a lot of people in Portola Valley have fire danger. So we're going to have to look at a lot of different issues. Fire-wise, one thing that is very close to my heart is this Safer from Wildfire joint program with the insurance commissioner and the governor and CAL FIRE. They have mentioned that they are encouraging insurance companies to give discounts to fire-wise communities. So we know that that is a benefit of being a fire-wise community. And I know that MG&D are looking into fire-wise. There's a variety of programs and how can we encourage that? As far as specific grants, because you are a fire-wise community, I have not heard of any for a town with our demographics. Jeremy, I have not heard of that. Have you?
No, and a Firewise community designation can help in any one grant, but it's typically there's other factors that tend to be more important when you're trying to secure a grant or having a successful grant. There's a couple different lists that the state of California maintains. One is an older list, one's a newer list. The older list is called Communities at Risk. We're on that one. The newer list has some additional elements that we're not on yet, but we're exploring how to do that. But by far the most important factor most of the time is shovel ready. Now that's not true for every single grant because there's certainly planning grants. My experience over the last couple of years in preparing grants and talking to granting organizations is, and this is a unique challenge for us, semi-unique, it's our size sometimes plays against us as well. They're looking for a big bang for their buck. So funding a community like ours doesn't tend to fall in that bucket. And more grants than ever that are for disaster preparedness and resiliency are now being offered to communities that don't have the same resources, socioeconomically disadvantaged communities and the like. If it's okay with you, Jennifer, since we're talking about this a little bit right now, as this group knows, the town, along with the town of Woodside, the county, and Woodside Fire has a relationship with CPOC, Community Partners Assistance for Wildfire. It's a resource grant. We've been working with them about a year. They just recently brought on board a grant writer for the fire district. And we had just met this person. And I know that Don is starting to think about potential the kind of potential programs he'd like the grant writer to write those grants for. I'd like to bring to a future meeting how this committee can help inform Dawn on the kinds of things that would be important to consider. We haven't done that work yet, but that's pretty exciting. And these would be for projects in Portola Valley, Woodside, and unincorporated. So we'll see where that goes. The grant I'm the most excited for is there's a grant early next year. So one to CAL FIRE that I think we would have some level of success. So I'm sort of gearing up for that one. I hope that helps. Thanks.
Yeah, if I could say something, I talked to the Firewise guy in Burlingame about a year ago. And I was just going to say that to get any of these FEMA or government grants, normally you have to be an NGO or a municipality or a county or a fire safe organization. Burlingame, they're unique in that they use the town to become a Firewise community, and they split it into north and south or something like that. So if they got any grants, it was probably because they were the city or town of Burlingame. It wasn't because they were Firewise, because Firewise is not an NGO. It's really just an association or a pretty loose, informal association.
The other important factor is something the town council did earlier this year, which was adopt a hazard mitigation plan. That opens the town up to a whole host of FEMA and state OES grants. Not having an adopted plan would make us unavailable for those, and that would take a ton of different grant opportunities off the table. So that was appreciated. Thank you, council, for doing that. So that's another way that we're looking at potentially funding either planning efforts or actual shovel-ready programs.
And I want to bring home again how patient and generous Jeremy has been. I cannot tell you the number of emails he has gotten from me. I just read this grant, and is it possible? Woodside just did this, and Jeremy very patiently sends me back an email, and he says, no, we did this or we did that. And so I have to say, I feel like the town staff is really digging for dollars. We've discussed maybe having him come and actually just go through all of the grant opportunities they have explored. We have a really packed agenda over the next few months, but we're trying. And I have also started a conversation with Dawn, and I do know what the district is doing. And part of our 10-year proposal is going to be in harmony with the fire district. It's very important. They are the leaders, and we want to have guidance from them, and we want to do something that will complement what the district is doing. So that will also be a factor. But we're going to next month here, mid-Penn, I think it's critical we hear about what's going on with open spaces. In the next month, Dawn's going to come and talk about enforcement, and we're going to get to answer or ask a whole bunch of questions to him then. And then hopefully Stanford will be coming, and then we will also be working on this deck issue, and we're going to then start talking about what's in this proposal. I would like to think we will have narrowed down what kind of funded wildfire mitigation program we are looking at by at least the first of the year, because I would like to actually bring it to the town council January, February to say, this is what we're looking at. This is our thought process, get their input, so that we have time to work with the town manager to have something ready to hopefully get started in the next budget cycle. And I do want to remind people, these programs do tend to start modestly and build. We have a very important right now town right-of-way project that's happening, and in my opinion, it's going to last a little longer than the 5-year plan, because I think there's important work to do. So, you know, our fire mitigation program will increase gradually. And then maybe what I'm personally hoping for is that as that right-of-way project begins to decrease, maybe we had Craig's laughing at me, that the fire mitigation program will kind of be able to take that money and we can build strong. But this is not going to happen in a year or 2 years. It's a 10-year proposal, because these things take time. And if you look at Woodside and you look at Lestranco's, these things have taken time. Okay, so any questions? No? All right, so next, we're almost done. My God, we're gonna end on schedule. Conservation Committee, Nona, do you have any updates?
I have one update that's probably relevant, and that is that, as everyone probably knows, one of the things that the Conservation Committee does is it reviews every year each of the town-owned open space properties to see what kind of maintenance they might need. And for one in particular, for Frog Pond open space, we have been working with the fire district to consider the Monterey Pines that are between Frog Pond and Corte Madera School, and we had agreed with the fire district that those are a fire hazard. And so last year, the council approved a budget that would allow the town to pay to have those trees removed, along with some other trees that we also considered a fire risk. And in addition to being non-native, they are over mature and there's a lot of dead wood in them. So that was supposed to happen, and it didn't happen because there's been an objection to it from resident. And that's all the information that I have at this point. I don't know if Jeremy wants to share more, but it just sort of highlights that not everybody is on board yet. And so the lesson that the Conservation Committee has taken from that is that we need to do more outreach to explain that, you know, every open space parcel in town is not, none of them are static. The trees are all going to grow, things are going to come in and establish, and that there really has to be a vision for what each open space parcel should become and the kind of maintenance program that is needed to keep it in that kind of condition. So I hope to have more updates on that at some future time, but the town really has to figure out how to deal with managing an open space when there's an objection to it.
If I may, through the chair, I can give just a quick
Yes, Jeremy,
additional
go ahead.
little bit of
Go
update.
ahead.
Nona got it all right. I understand that the objection was based on views. There were questions from the resident about whether or not we needed to prepare environmental documents for the removal of the trees. We've made the decision at this time to put this aside until we've got a little more time to delve into it. We don't want to create waves with anyone. But you know, maybe a candid statement for me. I think, you know, we're all human beings, and it's easy for us to want to see work done on someone else's property, but when it comes to ours, that can be a little more challenging. You know, certainly I think that that's experience in Golden Oak as well. Totally understandable. Change is very difficult. You know, I think to Nona's point, that continued education is going to be an important component, but when it does affect somebody, you know, directly, they're going to have a reasonable and understandable reaction to that. So we need to continue to make sure that the message about what's important as it relates to fire safety is forefront from what we do.
Okay. No, I totally agree with you. And I think outreach and having a good information strategy is vitally important. Okay. Any questions from the committee? Questions from residents? Okay. Standing items, I just want to say we are going to have a table at the town picnic on September 17th. I'm going to be there. I've ordered a table runner. I'm going to use MJ's page that has the QR codes on it so that people can scan it and get wildfire information. I believe one of those QR codes leads to the conservation committee's report, and if not, I should get an updated one, or maybe you already are going to have that at the town picnic. MJ?
You know, the QR code sheet I put together, I used this free app and all those QR codes expired. So I have to redo them.
Okay.
Sorry.
So, but if we could have that at the picnic, I would love people to hang out with me. If I think it's from like 11 to 3. So if you have time on September 17th, come visit.
I'll be there.
Okay. I'll bring the waters and you can bring the chips. Okay. No comments, no questions. Fire marshal is not here. I don't believe we have anyone to give that update. Jeremy, do you have, right? No. Jeremy, do you have any other staff updates?
Yeah, I do, and I'll go through these really quickly. This committee, as I mentioned in the past, is going to have a substantial role in the safety element update, and this is the portions that were not already included in the housing element update that happened. Those conversations were happening in January. So TBD on dates to bring that to the body, and I've indicated to Jennifer it may make some sense to have a separate special meeting for that discussion. So more to come. We are anticipating bringing to the town council in a few months updates to the home hardening code built off of I think there were 6 recommendations that Dawn was considering around the time of our implementation last year that weren't quite ready to bring forward. Jennifer, I've asked Dawn to come to the committee to discuss this, and we'll probably wrap it at the September discussion. I'll take more of that offline. They're really sort of cleaning up loose ends, a few other things. So stay tuned for that. Looking forward to your input there. Building a little bit on the Nona's discussion about the frog pond and generally on open space, the town has done work is directed by the fire marshal on other open space properties. The most important one to mention is up across from Blue Oaks. We did some mowing there. We've taken over some of those duties. There's more work that I'd like to see us do, and Don and his team are considering what that might look like. We'll wrap everybody into that conversation once we've got something that people can react to. Wanted to mention, although it's at the purview of this committee, since I have an audience, the draft evacuation study is out. We hope everyone takes a look at that and participates in the discussions at the EPC, although that will probably be a quicker one, but the big one will be at the council meeting on the 10th. So take a look. Then finally, there were 2 quick items I wanted to share. If I can share my screen here just very quickly. Our friends at CPA put together this document, Construction Costs for a Wildfire Resistant Home. This is a pretty interesting read. And it's really tailored for a new construction, but I think there's a lot that's applicable to renovations and the like. Jennifer, I think I shared this with you. We're going to put this out some more as well at our end, but we hope people take a look at it. Finally, on last week, the Woodside Fire Protection District Board had an item that was approved by their board to enter into an agreement with the Trust for Public Land. Essentially, it's a precursor to determining whether the district will pursue a parcel tax potentially in 2023 to support a whole host of fire mitigation and resiliency programming. This does not commit to a parcel tax. It's simply the prerequisite work to start to make some decisions about whether or not such a thing would be able to pass in the community, and what kind of programming should go into it. I just want more people to be aware. It sort of happened fairly quickly, but I think this is important as it relates to the good work Jennifer's doing here in the conversation around resources. So this will be in our weekly newsletter for those who want to read the letter. With that, that's it. Sorry, I went over 3 minutes. I really apologize.
You're wonderful. You're fine. Okay, so our next meeting is on September 6th at 4 p.m. Is everyone going to be here? I just want to do a quorum check. Yeah, everybody. Okay, great. Is there anything for upcoming agendas? Dee, I'm going to just know that either next month or the month after, you're going to tell me, I mean, a week before, very loose. We're going to have mid-pen next month, dawn the following month. Is there anything any other item? Okay. Then I think I'm going to call for the adjournment. Great. Thank you so much for being here. Do I have to do a motion for that, Craig? A motion to adjourn?
Yes, but if you end the meeting, then
I'm ending the meeting.
adjourn. So quorum,
I'm
then
ending
you can continue the meeting. So
Thank you. All righty. Bye-bye.